Welcome to the Revealed Podcast, where your stories are revealed and God is revealed in your story. You'll hear stories from people who live or have an affiliation with the Red Hills region of Southwest Georgia. And the people who share come from all walks of life. They're male and female. They have different backgrounds. Some stories will leave you wondering how the storyteller survived. Others are simple but will touch your heart. And we hope the stories that you hear encourage you in your own walk. Today, I have Sanford Hawkins joining me. And just to remind you, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, I'm Angie Durham, and I'm your host. Sanford is a local physician. He is a father of 3, and he is a husband to Marlo. And we really need to pray for Sanford because 2 of those kids are in college. And I just want to thank Sanford for being on the front lines. We have just gone through this coronavirus. We're still going through it. Sanford, thank you so much for just being on the front lines, for treating the patients you've been treating. And just, I know you've been working a lot of hours. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. We're called to do it.
Now, I don't know much about you as far as where you grew up or how you got to Thomasville. I can remember when you and your family moved here, but other than that, I don't know much about your childhood or where you grew up. So do you mind just starting there for us?
No, I'll be glad to. So anyway, I'm a product of Atlanta, Georgia, actually east of Atlanta in the town of Stone Mountain. I lived there off and on because through a remarriage of my mom, I ended up for a short period of time in McDonough, Georgia, but for the most part, we ended up moving back there, so I still consider it home. And, from there, I pretty much went to high school there at Parkview High School, ended up at the University of Georgia, and then over at Medical College Georgia in Augusta, where I spent 8 years as I went through my training. And then stayed there and worked until 2003 when I got a phone call from a friend who said, hey, they need a doctor in Thomasville, Georgia. And I called and asked questions and got answers, and here I am, kind of leap of faith, actually, because I'd never been to Thomasville. Down here interviewed, and here I am, and here I've stayed.
Something interesting about your family, and of course, I know the Hawkins family because Sanford's daughter is one of my daughter's best friends, and isn't that the beauty of sharing stories in small towns? But I just have to ask you this question. How many dogs live at your house?
Actually, living there now, there's 3. How many dogs are in the family? There's 5. Because Brittany just picked up a 5th one that was a rescue animal that she and her boyfriend went to Home Depot, and they had a husky that needed a home, and she's, being the soft heart that she is, brought him home and sent pictures, and so it's kind of hard to get mad when you see cute pictures of a dog.
I did see pictures of that dog, and that is a really cute dog.
I know, just can't say no to those eyes.
Right. Another thing I like to do as we start the podcast is just to ask some random questions because people like to know random things about us. So let me just ask you your favorite candy bar.
Oh, that's a hard question since I'm on a keto diet, so I don't do sugar.
Staying away from that.
Yeah, so back in the day, I would probably have to say probably the go-to was the Snickers.
Yeah.
It's got a little bit of everything, and
I agree.
I love nuts, and so since it had peanuts in it, you can't go wrong with that. And chocolate.
Got that protein, and
yeah.
I know if I'm really hungry, I'll grab a Snickers.
Oh yeah, you can't go wrong with that.
I agree. I love that. I also like to draw just random questions out of my cube here.
Okay.
This one is, what's the most beautiful place you've ever seen?
Oh my goodness, it's probably a tie between Zion National Park and probably Yosemite National Park. My family and I like to go out west for our trips since we've kind of grown up East Coast. So each year as a treat, we've always tried to go somewhere West Coast, and we certainly like to enjoy our national parks. And, we've been Glacier, we've done Yellowstone. Both of those were beautiful. I'm not taking anything away from them, but there was just something about Half Dome and, that area that was beautiful. But, we went up to Zion National Park and hiked to Angel's Landing, and being up that high is very humbling when you look down into the valley and all that kind of stuff. It also tests your nerves because, got a little bit of a fear of heights and couldn't end up finishing that hike just because there's certain areas that I think you're testing, gravity and the Lord's will and everything else. So I went as far as I could and said, I'll stand here and enjoy it. So I'd have to say, Zion would be my first choice with a close second of Yosemite.
I've never been to Zion before, but I've been to Yosemite, and I agree. It is so beautiful.
The falls out there, the Bridalveil Falls and some of those others, when they're really going. And, there's one that you can catch the sunset and it turns it golden. We didn't get the luxury of seeing it then, but I saw pictures of it and to me, that's close enough,
Yeah.
But,
so would you say that you're more of, because you grew up, you said, in Stone Mountain and
right.
McDonough too, but
Right.
were you more of a mountain guy or a beach guy?
When I was younger, I was the beach boy. I loved being, in the sun, and then at some point it was like, around late 30s, for some reason, all of a sudden I was struck with the desire to go hiking and do mountainous stuff and all that, and I kind of regretted now, because it's like a discovered, and it's like if you find a new food, you're like, wow, I didn't realize I like this so much, because the idea of bugs and tents and hiking and all that didn't sound appealing when I was 20. I just wanted to be on the beach and, wearing close to nothing and lots of oil, because, back in our day, we would wear straight up oil on our skin, and the misspent youth. But anyway,
Yes.
At some point I converted over, and now I'm just, an hour on the beach and I'm done. I'm like, okay, I've got my vitamin D, I'm done.
Yes.
And so, it's funny how you go 180 degrees. But so nowadays I'm a hiking guy. Back then I was a beach boy.
I can relate to that, especially now that I'm having to go to the dermatologist more often.
Trust me, when you start getting stuff cut off, it makes you,
That is so true. Well, tell me a little bit about growing up in Stone Mountain and then moving to McDonough, and just how you came to the thought that you wanted to be a doctor, because that takes a lot of school.
Yeah, no, it was funny how that came about. But just to back up a little bit, so my mom and dad got divorced when I was 5 years of age, and so I was the product of a single mother family. He was around on the weekends and 1 week during the summer, but other than that, I didn't see my father. So essentially, he was kind of out of the picture. And that was the case until the fourth grade, and then she remarried a gentleman from McDonough, and so we ended up living down there for about 4 years, and then they ended up getting divorced, and we just went right back to where we were, almost like a seamless transition back into the Stone Mountain area. And so again, at that point, single family, single mom, and then we just kind of, we went through the motions like everybody else does, went through high school and all that kind of thing. But anyway,
You have siblings?
yeah, I've got a brother. He's 2 years younger than me, but he's also a bodybuilder, so he's about twice my size, and so that's always been interesting. But no, he's the Incredible Hulk.
Wow. What about going to church? Did you guys grow up going to church, or?
Did, but it was very off and on. It was just mostly special occasions, the Easters and Christmases and stuff like that. We never really had a routine growing up. And again, kind of understand, because when you got a single mom, she works all the time trying to support you and all that kind of stuff. Sunday was her day that she just didn't have to do anything, and I get it. But, it also kind of, I think, delayed my, coming to Christ, which, happened when I was 13 and kind of just out of the blue, because it was actually while she was married to my stepfather, and he was trying to make the family work, so he started trying to get us back into the church at the time, and just kind of on my own, I was just kind of struck one weekend that I just wanted to know God, and I wanted to be one of his children, and I kind of made that announcement out of the blue, and I think it kind of caught everybody off guard. And so I ended up getting baptized because I was raised Baptist. I'm now Methodist, but that's by virtue of marriage. One of us had to choose sides, and I chose to come to her side instead of her coming to mine. But in all seriousness, and so I was baptized, felt the light, saw the light, and it was a point for me. And even though I certainly didn't have the guidance and strayed during my 20s and 30s from my religion, I was able to find my way home, so to speak. But I really do, in all of my heart, feel like that baptism was kind of the anchor point for which I was always able to kind of circle back, to where you came from, because again, it was just weird, because I felt like that I saw the light of Christ in the moment of baptism, and because they dipped me in the water, and just I had my eyes closed, but I felt like that there was this intense light that I was kind of covered in during all that, and I came up out of the water. And it was just from that moment on, for me at least, that was a point that has never gotten vague. It's never gotten dim. I mean, here I sit at almost 53 years of age, and it's still like it happened yesterday. And I kind of thank him for it, because I really don't know that I would have been able to have something to come back to had I not had that moment. But it happened spontaneously, and lived through life, and then as life went on, I realized I needed to come home.
I love that, because I've heard similar stories to that, and I've heard people talk about how when they weren't baptized, after they made a commitment to make Christ the Lord of their lives, that they doubted their salvation when they got older. So I love that baptism just it gives you a confirmation too.
Yeah, it really does. It gives you either a stopping or starting point, looking at where you're going with it, as opposed to, and again, I'm not discrediting at all those who haven't gone through some kind of ritual.
Right, absolutely.
But if there's a time and a date of a ritual that you can have as your starting or stopping point, stopping what you were doing or starting the Christian life, however you want to look at it. For me, at least, I needed that. People can get by without it,
right,
and probably do just fine.
Yeah.
But for me, again, I love my mother, but it was hard to keep two wild boys, from being wild boys, and we were. And you question yourself from day to day, why did God let me get out of a lot of stuff that I got myself into? And like I said, for me at least, that baptism was always my anchor, because I was pretty wild, and again, it was just.
A lot of us go through that.
I hope my children don't hear that, because as a father, there's a lot of stuff I haven't shared with them, and it was funny because my daughter asked me one time, Dad, did you ever do so-and-so when you were younger? And I look at her and say, sweetie, I'm your daddy. I don't have to answer that. And we leave it at that, because I'm trying to lead by example.
So you ended up graduating in McDonough. Am I following this story correct?
No, I was only in McDonough for 4 years, and that was from the time of 4th grade to the 8th grade.
Okay,
and then I came back to the Stone Mountain area, and so I graduated from Parkview High School, which is right there technically in Lilburn. But nobody knows where Lilburn is because it's overshadowed by this big rock. And so everybody can tell you where Stone Mountain is. And so, like I said, I could actually watch the laser show from the roof of our house.
Neat.
That's how close we were to the park. And so, I grew up there, and like I said, straight from there to the University of Georgia, and which was only, 30, 45 minutes up the road. But that was kind of where we ended up for the rest of my teenage years.
You started your career at University of Georgia. Did you know that you wanted to be a doctor at that point?
You did ask that question earlier, and I forgot to answer that one.
That's okay.
But I actually, I knew from the time that I was about 13 or 14, and I can't remember, but it was about that age, and I was actually sitting up eating breakfast, of all things, eating a bowl of cereal, watching TV, and PBS used to have something on Saturday mornings, and that particular morning was an open heart surgery. And so most people would be grossed out by that. They'd probably just, had to get up and leave the room. But here's this beating heart, open chest. They're doing surgery on it, and it absolutely floored me that this human being was still not wide awake. This patient was totally alive with the chest open. Here's the heart beating, and it was just fascinating that there was somebody that had the skill to be able to go in there and fix this human being without having to stop the heart, without having, And so I said at that point I wanted to be a heart surgeon. Now, clearly things changed since then, but that it was at that point I said, I want to do something like this. I want to care for people, and at that time, like I said, I thought I wanted to deal with the heart.
Well, that's impressive, because I was watching Scooby-Doo. I would have been the person who changed the 2 channels that we could get back then.
Well, I've never watched PBS before, and I don't watch it that much since, but it was one of those things these things that we take as random may not be as random as you thought they were.
That's true.
No.
That's true. So while you were at the University of Georgia, is that when you met Marlo?
Yeah, I was on the 6-year plan because I just got to be such a good student that I didn't see any reason to hurry that along, and she was the responsible adult and had finished in her 4 years, so she had actually come back for a football game. We had a mutual friend. We call her Mama Jenny because she's my mother-in-law's age. And so anyway, she said, you really ought to meet this nice young girl. She's a flight attendant with United Airlines. And I think at the time, though, she was U.S. Air. But anyway, this nice young flight attendant, I'm like, okay, here's a responsible young woman who's out on her own while I'm being a goofball. But anyway, it was one of those where, I won't call it love at first sight. It was interest at first sight. But, she saw me as the stray animal like my daughter sees puppies, and evidently she thought that I needed a home. I'm kidding. I totally digress. No, we just, started talking, and, like I said, she was working, so she would come back from time to time about once a month or so, and then after about 3 or 4 months of her dropping back in for a game or saying that, hey, you want to go out to dinner, and we'd go out to dinner and stuff like that, and it took off from there.
Did you guys get married soon after you finished at Georgia, or did you wait until you were in medical school, or when did that happen?
We waited until we were in medical school, and we were going to wait even longer, but it's kind of interesting. I didn't get into to Medical College of Georgia on my first application, so if you don't get in, back then, this was, sorry, let me do the math. So it would have been around 91. Back then, they used to encourage you to go and work on a master's or stay another year in school or do something different and reapply. But then they would turn around and really mess with your head. And then the next year when you went back and reapplied, they go, well, what have you done with yourself? Are you sure you want to be a doctor? Why didn't you, go work as an orderly, because back then a med tech was considered an orderly. And so anyway, I just decided that if I didn't get into MCG the first time around, that I was going to go to the Caribbean. So I actually applied to St. George's University, and it was funny. I got a call from a doctor in Miami who was one of their recruiters and said, "Hey, listen, we'd love to have you, blah, 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 blah." And next thing you know, 6 months later, I'm living in Grenada, going to medical school. And so I was down there for 2 years. And what happened was, when I found out that I was going down there, she and I had gotten engaged with the understanding that we would wait till I finished medical school, or towards the end of medical school, before we got married. But what happened is, it was like $2,000 for a flight back and forth, and I had no insurance, so I was having to buy insurance to live out of the country. And so, she said, "Well, why don't we just move it up?" She said, "Because if we're married, you'll have insurance under my, under my job, and then also you can fly on non-rev passes, and so for like $50, we can get you back and forth, because we would come home several times a year, because you'd have a break for like close to a month for Christmas, and then obviously you'd have summers off, and so that's $5,000 as a young student that I don't really have to drop." So I said, we're going to do this anyway. Let's just go ahead and do it. And so we did. So we ended up getting married during my freshman year of medical school.
That's a neat story.
It was an interesting story. It wasn't a straight path, that's for sure.
You guys have been married how long now?
We are going on 28 years.
Well, congratulations.
Yes. Yeah. I've convinced her that I'm the one, and as long as she stays that way, we're good.
Going through medical school is not easy. I've never been through that, but I've just known people like you who have accomplished that feat. Did you find yourself growing in your walk with the Lord during this time of going through medical school and just needing to call on Him for strength? And I know that you're not only mentally zapped, but physically. And
I wish I could say yes, but the answer is no.
Okay.
I mean, He would hear from me on test days, because I would pray to God that He would help me do well on my tests, because, obviously you don't want to fail your family, your friends, and all that kind of stuff. So the anxiety of all that was real. But in all fairness, I was just, I was so locked in. I did not, even on Sundays when I should have. I mean, there were times when we would listen to some local services on Sundays, but for the most part, it was just a brief prayer here or there. I mean, I never really deviated from the Lord, that far, but also I wasn't strong in my conviction that Sundays were to come back to Him or anything else like that, because Sundays were study days, Mondays were almost always test days, and so, you spent all day cramming from the time you got up until you went to bed. So, no, ma'am.
That's okay. We've got to be honest.
Yeah. I don't want to get struck by lightning, so I'm telling the truth.
So when did you see yourself starting to grow in your walk with the Lord? Say from 13, you made that commitment, you knew Christ was the Lord of your life, but when did things start to change where your relationship grew deeper with the Lord?
Yeah, I would say from the time I got baptized that I was fairly close to Him for about a year or two, and then as teenager years I got distracted, and I kind of wandered from Him, I would guess, until probably after I was married and actually working, in probably the birth of my kids, because I absolutely was fascinated how beautiful they were, and I really did. It was kind of funny because because I was there for all the births, participated in them and all that kind of stuff. And so when they came out, they were so beautiful, and I realized that God was actually trusting me to take a living creature that we were lucky enough to have, care for it, raise it, love it. And it was at that point it struck me that it was my responsibility for this infant to be brought to the Lord, and that the biggest way to do that is through my living the life. And so it came naturally. It wasn't like I had to do anything. It was just, okay, not that, my wife and I aren't Christian, not that we're not going to church, because we were, but, I'm really into it now, because now I have someone that I'm supposed to raise and give him somebody to emulate and all that. And then, Brittany came along, and she just reinforced that. And then, we thought we were done, and we had Hannah, and, she had some complications at birth, and so we actually thought we were going to lose her at, day 5th of life, because she had internal bleeding and all that. She had to be life flighted out, and so praying heavier then, and, crying going down the interstate because the helicopter flew her a lot faster than we could get there, and so, we were crying and upset and all this, and we weren't going to get to say goodbye. And then they called us and told us, that we could kind of slow down, and it wasn't as bad as they thought, and she was going to do all right. And so all these different things were just kind of bringing you closer and closer indirectly, because you're like, we're trying, we're doing it, we're on it. And like I think we've done a fairly good job. All three of mine, knock on wood, seem to be walking in the way of the Lord. And it wasn't that I sat down and threatened them with a paddle. I think they just saw their mother and father walking the life, and always bringing them up in the life according to the Lord, and we'll continue to do it because evidently it's been working so far.
I think that's such a good point too. I can look back at my childhood, and it was more of the life that my parents were living and my grandmother was living before me than what I was really hearing in sitting in a church. It was seeing that truth lived out before me.
Right. And I think from my wife and I, because she also came from a divorced family, and then my family having gone through 2 divorces, my real father and then my stepfather, one of the biggest things we did when we got married was we said, okay, listen, it ends here. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a 2-person family, and we're going to start a chain. And so I think that was another thing that was a good foundation for us, because at the end of the day, it wasn't even an option for us, divorce or anything else. So it helped us quicker to resolve issues that may divide certain couples. We said, it's not even an option. We're going to work through this. We go to prayer for it. And so I really think the Lord brought us back together at points where a lot of people may have said, I'm done with this. I've given it my effort. And we didn't have big issues, but at the same time, like every other family, there's plenty of times when people just, they don't have the emotion for the fight. And I think that with us going into it like that this is for the Lord. We're in it together. We're going to start this, and we're going to get 3 kids raised in the way of the Lord and send them out to raise their families. So we started thinking about it generationally, as opposed to having looked back at our families and allowed that, because I think it really makes a big difference. And like I said, I think that our kids will come out of this seeing their parents stay together and realizing that that's a very important legacy to carry on, is stay together, stay the course, and do it for the Lord, because He obviously put you together in the first place.
Yeah.
I realize that there's those that just can't for other reasons.
Right.
But I do think there are folks that give up way too soon because they think that the next one is going to be easier than the first one, being a relationship, and they never are, because you have to kind of come to center with somebody as opposed to thinking they're going to come to you. It's all about being able to get along and make concessions and all that kind of stuff. And I think if you look back at the Lord as being kind of your North Star, so to speak, then you ask yourself, what's He got in plan for me? Instead of what am I going to get out of this? Am I going to, trust me, I've wanted to win arguments as much as the next husband. But at the end of the day, if you're not keeping score, then you don't worry about from day to day what happened in the last argument, who won it and who didn't. You can get distracted by stuff that's really doesn't help us.
Yeah. And one thing that I realized with Wade and me too is his family, his mom and dad divorced when he was, in 8th grade. And I had issues in my family too. And so we both brought baggage into the marriage. And just as any married couple, same thing. We had arguments that would come up. They would escalate. And I'd get mad, he'd get mad. But at the end of the day, I think just both of us recognizing that we had that baggage and there were things in us that needed to change. And no, we weren't always right. And who cares on certain issues? So
right. It's not like fourth quarter and Angie's won all the arguments.
That's right.
And Wade's losing big time. But, the other thing is you also have to realize, and I came to realize, and again, it comes through time, because as a newlywed couple, you don't know these things. But she and I are totally different at conflict resolution. She's one that wants to get in and fix it now. She wants to talk about it in the now. I'm very emotional. I probably get a little too hot-headed at whatever got it started. And if you give me 30 minutes to walk around and clear my thoughts, I'm probably the most reasonable person you'll talk to. But, she wants to get into it right when it's going, and I'm like, give me a minute. And she's like, no, we want to talk about this. And so you got to find that happy medium.
That's right.
She's a fixer, and I'm a kind of a think about it first and before you open your mouth type, because I just don't work well on the raw emotion.
Right.
And so, we've come to a happy, kind of medium on that, because she realizes Sanford needs a minute.
He needs a minute, yes.
And I'm like, okay, Marlo's not going to let this go too long, so let me just breathe and start over.
Yeah.
And it's funny how, really, for me at least, giving it just a few minutes to rethink what it was, half the stuff that I realized I was being really silly about.
Amen.
I won't ever admit that.
Right.
And I'm hoping she doesn't listen to this. But no, I'm kidding. I totally
You know
jest.
she will.
Yeah, oh, I know.
Well, when I look at some of the things that y'all have been through, and again, talking about Hannah Faith when she was born, and I remember Marlo had a lot of problems with that pregnancy,
Right.
and then subsequent surgeries after that too.
Right.
As a physician, what is that like to see your family members have medical problems?
Probably about the same as being a pilot on a plane that you feel like is crashing and you can't get in the seat and control it. Because, there's nothing I could do for her. I'm not an OBGYN, and, I'm not a surgeon. And she had a blockage while she was pregnant and had to have CAT scans while she was pregnant. And so, Hannah had all that radiation before she even came out. And, so we had all this weighing on us. And I'm just kind of sitting on the sideline watching all this happen. Being a physician, I'm able to answer some of her questions, because, she'd get back from the doctor or she got out of the hospital and she's like, well, what's going to happen from here? And I could give her some answers, but I couldn't necessarily fix it myself, which is hard because as a physician, most of us want to heal or fix or do something for our patient, and it's frustrating when we can't because we're just bred that way, I guess.
When we fast forward to, is it a couple of years ago, I want to take a look at what you went through.
Right.
Because as we were saying before we kind of started, the healer ended up becoming the patient. So
very true.
Walk us into what happened to you.
Yeah, it was actually, it started earlier in the summer of 2018. We were actually out west in Glacier, and while we were on a trip, I happened to be shaving, and I noticed that one of my glands on the left side of my neck was swollen, which, I see swollen glands as a physician all the time, but this one seemed a little bit different because it was firmer, it wasn't softer, it didn't feel like something I hadn't had throat pain like you do with like strep throat or something, so I knew it probably wasn't an infection. But every once in a while, you'll find people that have a gland that didn't go back down after an infection, so I kind of said, I'll just get that checked out when I get home. And then, so July of that same year, 2018, I approached one of my friends who's an ENT and said, hey, you mind taking a look at this? And she did, and she said, we really ought to scan that. And through the scan, we discovered that there were 2 lymph nodes that were highly suspicious for cancer with no signs of the source. And so we immediately went to biopsy. The biopsy was positive for squamous cell cancer. And it was funny because I was sitting there in her office in regular examination chair, and she just told me, you have cancer. And it was kind of funny because in your mind, you always wonder, how would I react to that? Would I break down in tears? Would I freak out? And I didn't. I just, I think part of me kind of thought that's what it was because, I obviously do this for a living. And so when she told me that, there was almost a kind of a weird comfort in having an answer. Even though it wasn't the answer I wanted, it was rather than a week from the biopsy to the answer, I finally had my answer. And so then it was a matter of, okay, all right, next step. And it was at that point that I realized, and it was kind of funny, that I was like, okay, God has a plan for me. It was like someone walked up and handed me, here's your new plan. You weren't expecting it, but here's what you're going to go through. And you don't know how it's going to go, because at that point I didn't know where I was going to get my treatment and what was going to go on, because is it surgery, is it radiation, is it chemotherapy, is it a combination of all those? But just sitting in that chair, and it was kind of funny because, and I never would have thought I'd do this, but rather than call my wife on the phone, I texted her. I said, I need you to come up here to Dr. Williams' office. And she said, why? And I said, I just need you to come up here. And her response again was, why? And then it just came out. I texted, I have cancer. And the next thing you know, she calls me right back on the phone. And I think what I was afraid of was that I was going to break down. And I didn't want to break down. And so that's the reason why I did it in a more insensitive way. And again, you go, why'd you do it? And you don't know. I did what I felt, And so anyway, she was there within 10 minutes and talking to Dr. Williams, and here's what we can do. Here's what, And so we had some markers back, and we knew that it was an HPV-related virus and a viral-sourced cancer. And so the good news with that is to have a better success rate than most. And so we kind of had some positive news coming out of the room before we even left. And so anyway, she was like, okay, I'll get you set up with these different people, the radiation oncologist, the oncologist, and all, and we'll get it lined up. And so then I had another friend who's a dermatologist who said, listen, you're a doctor, you can afford a second opinion, you need a second opinion. And it was kind of funny because I give that advice every day, but I was so focused on just attacking this and getting started with it till I didn't even think that maybe I ought to get a second opinion. So I went and researched and found out that the folks out at MD Anderson were kind of the experts in this particular type of cancer. And so I went out there to Houston and poked, prodded, and they found the primary cancer. And they came up with their recommendations. And then, it was going to be a 6-week treatment course. So the question was, did I want to live out in Houston for 6 weeks? Because it was going to be Monday through Friday radiation and chemotherapy. And at that time, no surgery. And so I ended up coming back and getting another opinion closer to home. So I went to UF Shands. And so they said, we can do all your treatment. We can get it done here in Jacksonville. And at that point, thank God, because I was going to be able to be closer to home so I could come home on the weekends and see Hannah Faith, because obviously the other two were off at college. When we dropped this news on them to come home and they wanted to drop out of school, and I was like, absolutely not. You're not participating in this treatment. So why do you need to be here? Because it's not like I'm going to be laying, on a deathbed. I don't want you holding a vigil by me. I'm going to be going through my normal life. I'm going to be going through treatment. And then I'm trying to, you stay focused. You'll need the distraction. You'll need the time with your friends. You can process this. You can come home and visit. But like I said, we're going to try to make this as normal as it is. And thank goodness it stayed fairly normal. Stayed at school and all that kind of stuff. And so I ended up going through the treatment. We actually lived in a small little condo over on Jacksonville Beach, just because, like I said, every morning at 5:30 I was driving into downtown Jacksonville for radiation and chemo Mondays and all of the kind of fun stuff. And so then I'd drive home on the weekends and see family and all that. It was interesting. It was revealing. I mean, I'd seen that movie way back in the day, The Doctor. I don't know if you remember that movie with William Hurt. He was a surgeon and ended up getting throat cancer and going through all this. And so I forgot
about that movie.
I'd seen that movie, and it's funny because way back then it struck home as being a really good movie. And then here I am kind of playing out the same life. And so I went through all the treatment. I got stronger with my wife and really got stronger with the Lord then, because again, you go through the whole, is this a punishment? Am I being punished for my life sins by having to go through this? I came to the realization that it's not a punishment, that it's actually an opportunity. And so even though I've always taken care, as an ER physician, I've always taken care of people who have cancer, I've never felt like they were family. And it was funny that after I went through this treatment, I immediately felt like anybody who ever had or does have cancer is suddenly like a brother or sister in the fight, because we've been through the radiation, we've been through the chemo, and we've been through all the ups and downs, the highs and the lows together. And at the same time, they were faced with it the same way I was. Somebody dropped that news on them one day and their life suddenly changed. And from that point, you don't know where you're going with this. And so I've got to live it out.
Yeah.
I have no, there's no option.
Right.
I mean, you can choose to not get treatment, and certainly, on your own life story or where you are in it, that may be what you choose. But as far as what you choose, I mean, once you set the course, you just have to live the life. Good, bad, and otherwise. And, I was blessed with a wonderful wife. She was there with me almost every single day, and she came home sometimes to take care of the kids or to do stuff. But my mother-in-law helped out and stayed with Hannah Faith, and, we had a lot of support. And again, I think it's because we decided that, we were going to make our generation the first family to kind of bring everybody together. And so we had everybody kind of rallying around us. And so I was very blessed. I consider this whole thing a blessing at the end of the day. At the time, if you'd asked me, I'd have been like, let's see where this goes. But I was able to take it, at what the Lord had for me, and that was to help others. And so I guide others through the walk of cancer. It's funny how it's worked out. I've got, some online, like at the University of Georgia, it's a chat site for football, but I have helped more people with their cancers by encouraging them and giving them direction and telling them I've been there and this is what you can expect. And the same thing with people here in town, that I've gotten to help walk them through it and help them understand that this is not something that they're doing to get punished. They didn't ask for this. They didn't deserve this. It's just something that happens to all of us. The same as a car wreck, an airplane crash, or whatever. Everybody has a life event. It just happens to be that this is our life event. The good Lord knows your day of your birth and the day of your death and every day in between. And so he knew we were going to get this before we were even born. He knew that we were going to have a course to take, and he knows when we're coming home. And I'm just somewhere in the middle, and I'm going to help it's just what I feel led to do. I feel like that there's something that positive has to happen out of something that's negative, and we as Christians can do what we can to find the positive light in everything. It's not always going to be positive, otherwise we wouldn't need the Lord. If everything was great, what purpose would he serve? But I think the badness just shows his glory, because when you go through it and then you realize that there's something after that, whether it be the next day or the next week or the next month or the next life, there's glory in that. There's successes after the failures, and this really isn't a failure. This is just a course. It's a life course, and it's mine.
I fully believe that if the Lord allows something to happen in your life, He is going to be with you. He is going to reveal Himself to you in an even more intimate way than He would to someone who wasn't going through something difficult. So when you look back on that experience of going through the radiation, going through the chemo, the shock of just getting the diagnosis and not knowing what tomorrow may hold,
right.
Were there ways that God revealed Himself to you during those times?
Not that I know of, in so much that I wanted the burning bush. I wanted the thundering voice from above going, here's what I have planned for you, or I'm here with you. No, it was funny because I always felt like from the minute that I got that news dropped on me sitting in that chair, I always felt like He was there, and I kind of had that comforting feeling. It was funny because, like I said, I didn't know when I got told that news whether I was going to freak out, cry, whether I was going to be able to just, take it and hold it all in. And it was just a calm peace that I really think was the Lord just kind of, I hate to say putting His arms around me, but just kind of enveloping me in His presence. And I never once felt like He left. I mean, I knew, and again, I had no voice, I had no burning bush, I had no, it was just something that was there, and I could feel it, and I still feel it. And yeah, would it have been great? We don't always get that voice. I think sometimes the Lord probably gets to us without us even knowing it, just because the way pieces fall in, because I don't know, just in my experience, when you know He's there, I don't know, it's like when your husband's home and He's in the other room. You don't need to walk up and go in there and look to see Him there to know He's there.
Right. That's a good analogy.
You know He's there, and if you were to call out to Him that He's hearing you.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the same thing, because I always knew that the Lord was there. I never felt like He left me. Again, early on, I did wonder whether this was a punishment, but through prayer and through Bible study and all that, I got back to the point that it's not a punishment, that this is something that was just my life, and I'm living it. That's kind of the new saying now is live your life. I heard that after I went through all this, but it is to somewhat true, is that we always envision how we're going to live. We're going to be 85, we're going to retire, we're going to go on all these trips and go to Greece, and we're going to go to... The sad part about it is I wish they'd do a study to figure out how many people actually had the life that they thought they were going to live,
right. Because
we all have curveballs that are thrown and other things that are changed. And the great news is that He does know what's going to happen from the beginning to the end. I think we do make our own choices, but He just knows what those choices are long before we make them.
That's very true.
It's like He's seen the movie, and He knows the outcome, and He's just there with us while we go through the movie, so to speak.
But Sanford, I love the fact that you talk about that peace. And I think people who are not believers don't understand that. And, God does tell us that He will give us a peace that surpasses all understanding. And so when you're talking about your story, that's what I'm hearing, is that God really did give you that peace so that you didn't fall apart, or if you did fall apart, that was okay. You still could come back, and you had that comfort just knowing, like you said, that He's right there, and He never left you.
Yeah, no, he absolutely was there. He's still there. If He weren't there, I would have hated to go through this, because there would have been so much blame on myself and self-loathing and all this, because I think we're quick to want to punish ourselves when something bad happens. Something happens to you, whether you lose a job, you're like, what did I do to deserve this? Or get a divorce, what did I do to deserve this? Or just something bad happens, maybe your mother passes away or something, and you're like, I think without the Lord, you want to think of it as punishment, just because you think it's like life getting back at you for something you've done, when it's not really. They're just things that happen, and it's fantastic to know that the Lord is there. He's not always going to fix things, and I think we always reach out wanting Him to fix things. Lord, get rid of this, and if it's His plan, then it's going to happen. But if it's not, He's going to be with you while you go through it. It's weird, and I try to impart that on every patient I see that has cancer, is for them to be able to feel what I feel, that there's a comfort underneath it all, that there's a fluffiness to the hardness, if that makes sense. That it's not what you expected, but at the same time, there will be good at the end, whatever that end. And so I'm here. I feel tasked, not really tasked, because task is like something that you didn't want that got handed to you. I think it's more of a pointed in the right direction, so to speak, because I think we as humans always need something to do that's positive. And I think for me, this is it, is being the father, being the husband, being the doctor are all things that keep me afloat, but actually helping others that are going through their troubles, not fixing that problem, because that's up to the Lord,
Right.
But getting them through it, realizing they're not alone, realizing that they are stronger than they think they are, because I'll tell you, I have seen some very strong folks that make what I went through pale by comparison, be it by surgeries or whatever else they had. They had complications, they had blockages, they had to be hospitalized. I was fortunate in mine was a pretty uneventful course. I didn't have setbacks as I went through. I just, went through all the treatments. I had swallowing difficulties and I lost 25 pounds and all that. But again, that pales in comparison to some of the strong folks that are out there. And it's funny because, I would probably say 9 out of 10 of them will sit there and we'll be in the room together and we'll look at each other and say, God is good.
Yeah.
And the answer is always, all the time. And, I didn't know how many, because, I've been kind of reserved in letting my Christianity out because, again, in today's culture, you don't want to offend folks. You don't want to feel like that you're crossing that boundary because, yes, I'm your physician. How do we talk about God? Do you know God? And I've got some partners that are great about it. They'll pray with their patients and all that kind of stuff. And I really hope someday to get to that point. Now, I pray for their patients after I walk out of the room in my mind, and I sometimes pray for them when I go in there knowing that they've got something going on. But I've not gotten to that point where I can have that open dialogue unless the patient initiates it with me. Other than the fact that if it's a cancer patient, I have gotten brave enough to where I say, God's good. And again, for those that are still going through treatment, it's kind of hard because it's hard to hear that and think he is good until you get into it deeper than that and realize that he's there with you. And if you can get to that point, you realize that, yes, I may not be cured. I may still be fighting the fight. Things may look bleak, but I am not by myself, even when I'm in the room alone.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because we all want someone to be there with us.
This experience, would you say that it's given you more compassion for your patients, especially those that have cancer?
I wouldn't say more compassion because I've always been a very compassionate person. I'm kind of a teddy bear on the inside. I'm the nougaty center on one of those candy bars we talked about earlier. So I think compassion has never been an issue for me, but I think a connection may be a better way of putting it because before I went into it kind of more in a process-oriented way. I go in the room, this patient has an issue, they're going to present to me, I'm going to try my best to fix it or get them to someone who can fix it, and then we're going to move on. And I never really engaged on that next level until, I myself was the patient. And now when I go in the room, if it's you, I've got a new connection because, again, we've got a brother-sisterhood just by virtue of a struggle that we've gone through. And so I think I've gotten better about the connections. The compassion's always been there, but, now I can funnel that compassion in a way that's more godly than just going in and being a good doctor. Now I can be a better or a greater doctor by virtue of the fact that now I'm not only going to show you compassion, I'm going to show you some love and some understanding and all that. And it's not just cancer patients, because heart failure patients or whatever, it's kind of the same way. I haven't had exactly what you have, but I realized that you were presented with something that you weren't expecting that totally is life altering, at least for even a brief period or the rest of your life. Hey, again, as I mentioned before, we don't all get that charted course where we go to 85 and have great success, or 95 and get to do all the things that we wanted to do. And these folks are being thrown something and they're having to deal with it. And if I can help them understand that they, number one, don't deserve it, that it's just something that happened, that we'll get through it, I'll help them try to get through it. I'll walk them across the bridge, so to speak, or walk along their walk with them for the short period that I'm with them, and hopefully give them a little encouragement to stay the course, remember the Lord, because he is there, sometimes louder than others. Like I said, I never got a burning bush or a trumpet or anything, to let me know that this is the Lord. I am talking to, we've all seen that joke, Lord, give me a sign. Lord, give me a sign. And, 10 signs later, you go, I never saw it. He goes, I've been with you the whole time, didn't you?
Right, it's true.
And so he's always worked through me. I just didn't know. Happy that I came back to him because, again, at 13, there was no doubt in my mind that I was in the presence of the Lord, or he was in my presence. However, at the moment of my baptism, because that light I experienced is like none I can describe. And like I said, maybe he knew that I was going to need that moment in time as my structure for the rest of my life, because he knew that I was going to stray from him for decades, and then slowly I would come back to him, and only by virtue of the fact that I had that point to focus on. Because again, my lifestyle and my family life and all that was not conducive with walking the way of the Lord for the longest time, because there was no structure there. We all have different paths. Mine was not the straightest, but you know what? At the end of the day, I am blessed that I got a chance to come back, and I know that, Jesus Christ is my Savior. He did die for me. And that, if it were up to me judging me, I would not be anywhere close to the gates of heaven. But, I'd get to lay that burden down because the decision was made for me by virtue of the fact that I've accepted him as my Savior. And everything else besides that is just living it out until I get a chance to come home.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Looking back again on your journey, were there people along the way who encouraged you, and maybe you felt like when they said something to you, it was just the encouragement you needed on a dark day? I'm just thinking of those of us who have never experienced what you have experienced, but
Right.
just being able to reach out to people and encourage them, how we can be an encouragement to people who may be going through what you went through.
I don't remember anybody in particular in my case. I got a lot of outpouring from a lot of different people that were there for me. Got this, here for you. I mean, all the staff in the emergency department made T-shirts, Kick Cancer. I can't remember the exact title on the shirt. And these are people that are near and dear to me, but they're even more so now that they went to all that trouble, because here I'm in Jacksonville and they got me a shirt and they're all wearing their shirts and they're showing pictures, all that. And it meant a lot, and it helped me realize that I'm fighting this fight for more than just me. I'm fighting it for others that are proud of me and, all that kind of stuff. But I don't remember any one particular person that was that, because there were just so many. I mean, even when I was over in Jacksonville, it was like every morning we'd go in for radiation, and here's a room full of folks who were there for the exact same thing. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I look at each person, I'm going, you're going through this, and you're going through this, and you're going through this, and they're just happy, and they're having coffee, and they're talking. Some of them were there for other cancers that they could still drink, and they could still have their coffee, and they could go out to dinner, and they go, yeah, we're going so-and-so to dinner, you want to come? And it's like a little network of happy family. And here I am with my throat cancer. No, I can't eat. No, I can't drink. I'm just down to broths and can barely swallow, but I'd be glad to visit with you. And so I would, and it was just kind of funny because they were just as much inspiration, but it wasn't about anything that they did. It was just, again, if you look around a room and there's 20 people or 30 people all going through the same thing, and they were bringing in children, they would give the parents something to sedate their children before, so they'd come into the door with a sleeping child in their arm who was then going in for their radiation. And these were little old bitty children. I mean, I'm talking less than a year old, who had brain tumors and spinal tumors. And so you see this mom and the look on her face, and she comes through, and you're like, mine pales by comparison, because I can't imagine if that were my baby, or me having to be the mother worried about my child and how long are they going to live and how can I do this and have time for this. I got to support my rest of my family, because there are so many things that in those eyes that you just don't know, but you know that there's a whole story there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and so those are the people that I think that had more of an influence on me than anybody who just said, hey, proud of you, keep it up,
Right.
that kind of stuff. I think it was the folks that I saw doing the same struggle, or maybe more struggle, or something else like that. And I'm like, you guys are fantastic.
Yeah.
Y'all inspire me.
Yeah.
And so the Lord got to me in that way, I think, was because, different people need different things. And for me, I have all the medical knowledge, I have all that kind of stuff, and I know treatment plans, and I know cure rates, and I know all that. But I didn't know life until I actually saw it and sat quietly waiting for my radiation, looking at somebody else, looking at these children, like these older folks that were going through the prostate and the breast and the other stuff. They act like it's just another day in the park. And like I said, one of my friends was down there. He's from Washington, Georgia, and he's probably 80 years old, and he was there for prostate cancer. And he was like, he'd going around shaking everybody's hand, and I'm so-and-so. And he was like the welcome wagon. It didn't faze him one bit, and so if it didn't faze him, I shouldn't let it get to me. And it was just funny how each person affected me just a little bit different but they all, as a group, they actually, made it a whole lot easier to go through, and I actually, liked my mornings. I didn't dread the radiation. I didn't dread the chemo on the next day after the chemo. It was we used to joke about that being chemo brain, because one day it was just like a blur. I don't even remember the whole day. It's what we've got to go through. And, it's just one more connection, because now when I'm taking care of that lady that comes in with the breast cancer, I'm like, chemo's rough, isn't it? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm with you, sister. I did it. So, like I said, there's a lot of different levels that I didn't have in my black bag before,
Right.
Besides the stethoscope. Now I've got knowledge and experience on the actual going through it. And so, like I said, it's not anything I would take back. I truly think if God sat here in the room today and said, can I take that whole part out and we'll just do a redo, you never had it, no. I don't think so, because like I said, that's a part of me that's made me who I am today, and is actually just as firm in helping my beliefs and my strength as that day when I was 13 and went and got baptized, because I have great memories of all the badness, if that makes sense, that I went through, because every day was a success. Because I sit here today with you, having gone through that, and having gone through my follow-ups and all that kind of stuff, and each time I visit with them, it's a reassurance that I'm on the right path. I need to stay the course for me. but I also need to stay the course for others, because I've also come home that we're not just about getting to heaven. It's helping others see the light to get to heaven. We are fishers of men in a way, sometimes by leadership or just by being one. People see us that way. And then sometimes it's by actually being more vocal. And that's not for me. I'm not a pastor. I'm not an evangelist. I will lead you by example, and I will lead you by experience, and I will lead you by being a good friend to you and helping however I can. And for each person that I help lead to Christ is somebody I get to see in the future.
As you're talking, I'm just thinking about your patients now, and when they find out that they have a cancer diagnosis, but then when they learn that their doctor had a cancer diagnosis and he made it through it. He went through the radiation, he went through the chemo, and he's come out on the other side. That has to really encourage your patients.
I hope so. I hope they realize then that what I'm telling them is not lip service.
Right.
It never was. But I think when you've gone through it, they look at you and go, I think he's a straight shooter. Say, listen, I've been there, I've done that. This is what this is what you can expect. Or if they've already gone through it, hey, we went through that together, didn't we? Chemo's a real thing. But anyway, that's all I want. I've wanted patients to trust me and believe me and know that I've always got their best interest in mind. It's not about money or dollars. Like I said, I don't let insurance companies and all the other things that come in affect the way I treat my patients. Because at the end of the day, I have to lay my head on my pillow and I have to know that I've done the right thing for the person who trusted me with their life, for whether it's 10 minutes or 4 hours, that I'm always doing what is best for them to get them well and get them back on track. And so I order a test because I need it, not because someone tells me to do it, or I order other stuff. I refer them not because I'm getting any kickbacks, which I'm not, but because that's where they need to go. And I think that now that they've seen me or know that I have been a patient, that they, it just gives you street credibility.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Otherwise you're seen as a white coat with a stethoscope and everybody's going, well, this guy doesn't know me from Adam. He won't know me tomorrow because I'm just here for one day. Does he really have my best interest? And so I think if they realize that for the most part, we're out there trying to do the good deed. I've just done the good deed and experienced it on the other side. That we're doing the right thing.
Were there any scriptures that stood out to you during your journey that really encouraged you?
John 3:16. I know that's passé in everybody, but it really was. And I don't know what it was because it was funny because I didn't search through the Bible looking for scripture and I didn't look for this. It was just something that just it was in my head from the minute. And so put that on that t-shirt as a matter of fact, because one of my friends at work says, what's your scripture? What's your go-to? And I guess because I got taught it at a young age and it's like my fallback, I say the Lord's Prayer. The one thing I will say about my mom is even though she didn't have us in church that often, we were saying the Lord's Prayer. And when you were scared, you said the Lord's Prayer. And when you were troubled, you said the Lord's Prayer. And it was kind of the same thing with John 3:16. I wasn't versed in the Bible. To tell you the truth, I've not read it from front to cover yet, and I'm having to use my little apps and stuff to keep me on track because it's easy to get distracted in life stuff. But John 3:16 was always there. I could say that verse standing upside down. But anyway, it was just it. And I say it over and over, and it's true. And especially for me because, again, I don't deserve to be in heaven if you ask me. But I'm going to get to be in heaven because I trust in the Lord, and I know that Jesus is my Savior, and I think that there really was a Jesus. I shouldn't say I think. I know there really was a Jesus who was a man who died on a cross, and he took everything in so that we could be who we're going to be, and that's people who get to go to heaven and who get to see the glory. And I know that, and that's the thing that's so funny is despite what I think of myself or what I did when I was so-and-so age, all this kind of stuff, it does not matter. It does not matter. I have a free pass as long as I believe what I believe. It's that simple. Right. And so that's hard to get over because, again, for those of us that want to do right, we also chastise ourselves, and we're harder on ourselves even than other people would be. And so for those of us that haven't lived the straight and narrow, as many of us haven't, I'm blessed. I truly am. I see things now for what they are, and that's the fact that I believe, and since I believe, I get there regardless of what I've done. It's amazing. It's fantastic. It's liberating. It really is because, like I said, I get to set those burdens down. I kind of joke. I said part of the human's problem is that we have memory. Mm-hmm. Because if we didn't have memory and we lived only from the forward on, then it would probably be easier to get to heaven because you wouldn't hold all those burdens against yourself, and you'd be able to forgive yourself because you don't remember what you did. Because, a lot of us go, I can never be that person. Well, if you didn't have that memory, you wouldn't know that you couldn't be that person because you didn't know what you did.
That's true. Yeah.
So, in a way, it's kind of an anchor because it always takes you back to the bad part of whatever you did or the not so Christian part of what you did. But if I didn't have memory, I also wouldn't remember when I was 13 and got baptized. So I guess there's good and there's bad with it.
That's right.
But I just hope that others can learn to lay those same burdens down on themselves and realize that it doesn't matter what you did or what you're going to do. As long as you're on the Lord's path, you're living the Lord's life, and you remember that Jesus Christ did die for you so that way you'd have a chance.
That's such a good word, because one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is to offer people hope and encouragement. And we all know the things that have been going on in our world lately. And I've been talking to a lot of people, and they're just scared. You have those anchors in your life. Thinking again back about the baptism and just knowing that you saw that light and just having that assurance. Your salvation was free. All you had to do was believe and accept it. And that's what you did. And so none of us are perfect. And like you said, we do have that memory, because sometimes I do need to remember things that I've done that I don't need to do again. I need to learn from them.
Very true.
But the great thing about our God is He does not condemn us.
Right.
And I think so many times people think that God is a God of condemnation, and they look at situations like yours and they say, well, he's a good man. He takes care of his family. He's a doctor. He's well known in the community. He's a Christian. How could something bad happen to him? In hearing your story, you've had so much good come out of it. And I think that's what non-believers miss, is the good that can come out of our stories even when something difficult happens to us.
No, absolutely. And especially in today's world, because again, I'm tried on an everyday basis just like everybody else is, but fear and stress and anxiety work against the Lord, because again, it's kind of like the fear and stress and anxiety of going through cancer treatment. Well, society is the same way, and we always think of God as a fixer, pray and He'll fix it, or pray and He'll take care of it. Everything has a course, and everything has to stay the course, play itself out, so to speak. So I can't worry about stuff that's happening in another city or something else that's happening to another person. We see them, we witness it, but at the end of the day, we have to realize that it's outside of our hands. And for us to worry about it means that we're not allowing the Lord to take care of it, if that makes sense. It's kind of like, me worrying about my cancer didn't make it any better. Mm-hmm. I had to live it out, and the Lord would take care of it. And the Lord is clearly in control. It doesn't seem like it right now, but trust, He's in control. And the less we worry about everything else, the more we worry about ourselves and love each other, the rest will play out. It's not always pretty, because, Revelation just doesn't sound like it's going to end up pretty. It's going to end, and then the glory begins. It really does. But, everything has to come to, was it that old movie with Tom Cruise, was it Cocktail? He said everything ends badly or it wouldn't end. And I hate to say that because it sounds negative, but it's not meant negative. It's meant positive, because, again, we have to go through the lows to have the highs.
That's true.
And this low we're going through, we can't know when it's going to end. We don't know how it's going to end. True, this COVID and, the COVID and the riots and everything else like that. For me, people are like, well, aren't you scared of COVID? I'm like, no, because, I'm with God. God is with me. Every time I walk in a room with a patient, and whether I'm going to contract it from that patient or not, I'm doing everything I can to prevent it. But it's ultimately up to the Lord.
That's right.
I could go in there in a suit of armor, and if it's just meant to be, then it's meant to be.
That's right.
So I trust in Him that it's His plan, that it's already in play, and that I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do, which is care for my patient. So I gown up, a glove up, a mask up, I go in there, I care for them, go in, rinse, wash, repeat, whatever. And, it's that way with the riots. I mean, there's nothing we can do to stop it. But we can lead by example. We can not overreact. We can trust in Him. And then, like I said, when we lay it at His feet, it's a whole lot easier to shut off the TV and not worry about what the rest of the world is trying to do. Yeah.
And as you're sitting here talking again, you just remind me of one of my favorite quotes from Corrie ten Boom, and it is that we can trust an unknown future to a known God.
Very well said. I said the same thing. It just didn't sound as good, eloquent. No, I'm kidding. It's what I intended. It was in my head. It just didn't come out that way.
And not my quote, but hers.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful you shared your story, just been so honest and forthright with everything that you've been through, and I know that your story is going to encourage a lot of people. I just want to encourage anybody out there that may need prayer. You can contact me at Angie@revealedpodcast.org, and you can find more information on our website at revealedpodcast.org. I have to give a shout out to my technical engineer, William Hamill. He helped make this possible today, and I also would like to thank everybody for listening.